Hey, bookworms. This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina Conversation. This episode features a chat with Julia Ridley Smith. We're talking about Sex Romp Gone Wrong. That is a collection of short stories available on February 6th. So if you don't have a whole lot of time on your hands and you just want to like read a short story, put the book down, get started on another story, put the book down, this is for you. This was a really cool conversation with Julia. We were talking about kind of like just the themes in her book and then also how her life personal experiences inspired this story. But without further ado, here is Julia Ridley Smith. Okay, so today we've got Julia Ridley Smith. We are talking about Sex Romp Gone Wrong. That collection of stories comes out on February 6th. Julia, thanks for joining me today. I enjoy a collection of short stories, and I think it's just always really cool to see how they all come together. And we're going to get into it. So thanks for joining me today.
Great. Thank you for having me, Megan.
Sure, perfect. So before we get started, can you give like a little rundown, like a little summary of the collection so that listeners can follow along with the conversation?
Sure. Sex Rom Gone Wrong is a collection of 12 stories. They're all centered around girls and women who are dealing with really everyday problems of love and desire and friendship. Some of the stories follow the younger part of girlhood and teen life, and then others get into what it's like being more middle-aged. So there's a range of characters, including some are moms, some are daughters, friends, lovers, wives, lots of different roles that are getting played out. And really, the stories are about the struggles that I think women and girls commonly encounter in those roles, and also some of the ridiculous situations they can get us into, or
Yeah.
we get ourselves into, or that
Yeah.
happen
I know,
to us.
I love it. I know, because some of the characters, I was just like, I don't know. So some of them were, oh, what's she doing? I wouldn't do that. But that's what makes it real and authentic and like entertaining too. It's just, what are you gonna do? Like, how are you gonna handle this? What are you doing?
And I feel like that's my running dialogue with myself. Like, uh-oh, what's going on now?
Come on, Julie, get your shit together,
Yeah,
right?
pretty much. That's that's
Yeah,
on
I say that to
stage.
myself every day. Don't worry.
Yeah. As my students say, relatable, right?
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so can you go into like your background a little bit and either personal or professional, like what led you to put together this collection and maybe like anything that prepared you for this project, things like that?
Yeah, so I have been writing stories since I was little. I always was a kid that loved to pretend, and I was always writing, and I was really into drama when I was in high school, and I did ballet, and I did all the creative things when I was growing up, but writing settled out to be the one that I was the most kind of excited about. And I think growing up in a family that loved reading and wordplay, that really set me on my path. So I studied creative writing in college. I went to grad school and got an MFA. I did all of that. But when I got out of grad school, I I dallied with getting a PhD in literature and becoming a literature professor, but ultimately I decided I was not a scholar. Um, and so for a lot of years I was a freelance copy editor. And so I was juggling like writing and raising my son and doing freelance work. And I think I just always loved writing short stories and reading short stories. And now that I teach creative writing, I'm in like my seventh year of teaching creative writing, I teach short stories a lot to my fiction students. The other thing is that before publishing this book of collections, I published a memoir that's about cleaning out my parents' house after they died, and they were antique dealers. And so
Mm.
some of those experiences show up in the fiction as well. There are a couple of stories that are set in assisted living facilities that sort of draw on my experience of those places. There's another one set in an antique shop so they're not autobiographical in that way, but they do draw on, all of my stories draw on my life experience in some way, but none of them are autobiographical in that straightforward sense.
Sure, yeah. I think that's really common with a lot of short stories. Like you get ideas because just from little things here and there. Imagining how might this hot mess of a teenager like handle this situation.
Yeah, poorly is
Yeah.
usually the answer. Huh?
Exactly. It's like a rite of passage though.
Absolutely. Yeah, I went through it and then I witnessed many other folks doing it too.
Yeah. Levels, grade levels do you teach then or age
I
groups?
teach at college
Okay.
level. Yeah,
Okay.
college creative writing, which
That's
is really fun. I love it.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I bet, yeah. I imagine it's like never a dull moment. Or if it is, maybe it's like a nice break. I don't know.
No, it's pretty great. And especially I think with intro level fiction writers, they're so excited to be in there and they're just busting loose after having gone through so many English classes where they've had this
Mm.
really kind of rigid way of that they had to write. And so they're very excited to get to exercise their creativity.
Yeah, to kind of just unleash like little refreshing, like just to really let go and let loose. And maybe
Yeah.
something that's not, maybe there is pressure and creativity, right? Like you want to make it a really good piece, but I imagine there's just more freedom and it's more like subjective, right? Where it's,
Yeah, they
mhm,
love getting to have that freedom
yeah.
to write whatever they want. I'm pretty like, you can write whatever you want as long as you don't creep out your classmates so bad that they don't want to get elevator with you after class. Kind of one of my rules of thumb.
Oh, because you have them like peer review and stuff, or did you have
Yeah,
like read aloud?
they critique each other's work.
Oh, that's so funny. I know, I think I had a conversation with another author who he was talking about how he was into he felt like he didn't really fit in when he would because he was writing short stories too. But then I'm like, well, I'm sure as you got older and you got more into your craft, I'm sure you just find your audience, right? You just even if you learn, okay, maybe I shouldn't say these things out loud, but you eventually find your audience who that they draw that. Like, he was like more into the splatter western or
Oh,
splatter punk, the kind of horror adjacent genre. And so I was like, no, you get older and you learn that there's a community out there. There's an audience out there for you for that stuff.
yeah, and I think it's useful. I definitely have a lot of students who are more students now than I used to who are interested in horror. I think it's a popular genre right now, and it's not my thing, but I still feel like even if the students are interested in genres other than what I am interested in, there's plenty that I can talk to them and teach them about narrative fiction, about character development, and all of those things
Yeah.
that would be useful to them.
Yeah, it applies to like a lot, to no
Yeah,
matter what. Like it needs to make sense. Like a lot of these concepts, like elements
right.
apply to yeah.
Hopefully,
Yeah,
at some level, yes.
I'm right there with you. Like horror, I don't know. I guess I'm more welcome to reading it rather than watching it.
Oh,
There's
gotcha.
yeah, there's some movies that I'm just like my interest is piqued, so I'll watch it, but I feel like I have to be like in a certain mood. I think there's a lot of like horror or like maybe on the more like disturbing side movies that I've had on my watch list for like years because I just haven't been like I feel like I have to be in a mood for it. But when I read like short horror stories or suspense and thrillers, not quite
Mhm.
horror, but when I read like the horror elements or dark fantasy, I feel like maybe it's because it's not so in my face. It's like I can whatever my brain wants to do with it and like how it imagines how it's played out. It's more like up to me. So versus the visuals and how the story's playing out and I can pause it, but I can't like it's gonna go at the pace that it goes, right? Like,
Right.
when you're reading it, it's such a different experience, so, no, I share that sentiment with I don't really like being scared.
No, I can scare myself well enough. I don't need like a lot of help. Doesn't take much.
That's hilarious. So, hopping off of that with your yeah, you wrote the memoir. I was reading on your website and stuff that you did that. How did that experience differ from because it was like an essay form, right? Like a bunch of
Yeah.
essays in your memoir. Yeah. So how did this experience with your collection of short stories, like the fiction, how did that compare? Like how was that different? Did you approach it the same? Any big lessons learned, things like that?
It was different because the short stories I've been writing over a period I wrote these stories over a period of probably 20 years, even a little bit
Mm,
more than that. And I've written other stories and lots of other things along the way. And when I gathered this collection together, it was just because I realized I had a dozen stories that shared themes. So they really like fit together. So I was writing each one as a discrete short story at the time, at a certain time in my life. Whereas when I went to write the essays for the memoir, I started by writing a couple of the essays and then definitely had the idea that it was going to become a book of linked essays, really, that tell this story about cleaning up my parents' house and about some of the objects there that were really meaningful to me. In writing nonfiction, it was really the first time that I'd written those kinds of essays, but they let me explore different things about the material than, say, the short story form does. And I feel like for the short story form, what I'm really interested in is the characters
mm,
and how they develop emotionally. So I'm really burrowing into what is going on with them and all of their mixed feelings
yeah.
and and what does that mean for them? Whereas in essays, I'm following my curiosity about ideas more. Even though I'm telling a story in those essays, it's also letting me look at the way other thinkers have talked about certain ideas about material culture, that sort of thing. I liked being able to write in these different veins, and I think I'll continue writing fiction and nonfiction. And sometimes even I'll get an idea and I'm like, is this an idea for a story or an essay? And so I have to weigh it out and determine, is this more of a story where something that feels more like a story I want to tell about a person's interiority and what's happening in their emotional life? Or is it something that's percolating a lot of questions that I want to
Mm.
do research about? So,
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. It's you gotta listen to your gut, like what seems right? Should I explore it? And what lens do you wanna look at? What do you think
yeah.
about it versus what how creative can you get with taking it further? Like imagining, yeah.
And it's also
Yeah.
whether I want to have to stick to facts or if I want to be able to just jump off into making things up, which is a lot of the fun of writing fiction.
Yeah, yeah. I again, getting off of that, I wanted to explore like your research process.
Mhm.
Did you do like any research? Because like you said, you could make stuff up, but I'm sure you had to like dig around deeper outside of your brain. Like how did you? Was there anything fascinating that you learned? Things like that.
Yeah, for the short stories, there's not so much of a research. It's more if some small point comes up, then I need to research this one particular aspect of something. The story's largely made up, but there might be a detail about the character or something that's going on in the time period or with the character's interests that I have to look up. It'll be really random things that I have to Google. So there's a story. There's a story called Delta Foxtrot in here that's about a woman whose family was really into boating. And so the way that they have their sort of like family in jokes and the way they talk to each other is through the language of semaphore flags, which I didn't know anything about
Yeah.
at all. So I had to go look them up, and it was actually really fun to look up what each of the flags means, and they're assigning different words to different letters of the alphabet, and then what these flags mean, and to work some of those messages into that story was a one fun example of it. Was just a little bit of research I did, but it played a role in the subtext of that story and how the people in it can't articulate what it is they need to say to each other.
Yeah, and then when I remember that because then when I matched the 2, what delta means and then what foxtrot means to, like, juxtapose those, it's what was it? It was like delta means like, one it was, like, about communication, like, one was, like, "I can't talk right now," or but then foxtrot was along the lines of, "I need someone, like, I need to talk to you." Something like that. That's the gist of what I remember. I know I'm, like, looking
Oh,
at,
now
like,
I've
where
forgotten.
yeah,
Uh,
like, where's my PDF here?
some of them. So there's one that gets mentioned where that's her father, the character's father who's sick. And then one of the lines is whiskey, I require medical assistance. So whiskey is one of the flags. Yeah, so I was using those flags as this shorthand to create that that language that would stand in for what the characters can't manage to say to each other. Yeah, here it is. Delta, meaning keep clear of me. I am maneuvering with difficulty.
Yeah.
So, so that would be one example of research that I had to do, or I'm trying to think if there was another one. A lot of it is just things that are coming out of my own experience and my own weird little bits of knowledge that I have about things, having grown up in a family of antique dealers that
Yeah. Yeah, I
we,
kind of want to dig into that. Like how did so both of your parents they owned the antique shop as a joint project? I
yes,
don't know. I can only because I don't know. My mom, she's like in her she is early 70s, and but she's that's like always been her thing. Like she really enjoys antiquing.
yeah,
And my dad does it to flatter her, but it
sure.
wasn't like a mutual hobby or anything like that. So I imagine were you also into it too, or were you just like over it? Like how did
Yeah, some of both. By the time I was born, they had opened this shop. So they always had it when I was growing up. And my mom did a lot of the buying, and she would go out on the road and do the buying and go do shows where she would set up a booth and do the whole thing. And my dad stayed back at the shop and took care of the business side of it. He did the bookkeeping and that kind of stuff. And I think it suited both of them just because neither one of them was real like enjoyed having a 9 to 5 job. They'd done that briefly in their youth, and
Sure.
decided that wasn't for them. So having a shop let them do that. And I think if anything, that was what I got that from them too, that when I grew up and tried to have a 9 to 5 job, it just really did not work for me at all. I couldn't stand just sitting in the same place all day long. Um,
Yeah.
so I've always looked for jobs that had flexibility. But as far as the antiques go, yeah, I was like, my brother was really into it. He started buying stuff when he was little and like putting things in the shop and wanting to learn about everything. And I liked learning about this stuff, but I had no interest in the business part of it.
Okay.
Like, I
I
just
could see that.
am not interested in like buying or selling anything or thinking about profit margin, any of that. No.
Like the operations. I could see
Yeah.
that where it's you yeah, the history of it, the sentimentality of it, or what kind of story does this piece
Mm,
tell type of thing. I could see how that would
absolutely.
be more appealing than, "Oh, who's this target market?"
Yeah, or let me follow these folks around the shop trying to tell them about things when they're just trying to figure out what's going to look good in their fancy house or whatever.
Exactly, exactly.
That wasn't really for me. But yeah, it's the stories and the objects is something that's definitely that was really the focus of my memoir. But it also shows up in these stories. Definitely in the story called Et tu, Miss Jones, which is about a young woman who is grieving for her parents and befriends an older man who's running an antique shop. And I think why she's drawn to him is because he works up these kind of fantastic stories about the objects in his shop. And it's that sort of this idea of making stories and making magic from the objects that is what is appealing to her and what she is like missing after
Yeah.
her parents go.
Yeah, yeah, I could definitely sense that because yeah, because I remember thinking about that character. I'm like, what is it seemed like an odd thing, like an odd hobby, like an odd pairing. But then once you get it in the context, then you get into the character. You're like, oh, okay, you understand her psyche, you understand the motivation and the underlying what she misses and why she's drawn to that environment. And then, of course, like the drama that happens with. So, oh my God, what did you do, girl?
Well, but a friend, there's some friend drama that goes on there, right?
Yeah, yeah, but it's like the fun of it, right? Like all these personalities and the conflict and the drama, and that's just
Yeah.
what makes it entertaining, and it makes you think because it, obviously in that story, like the two, I don't know, the opposing sides, they know of each other through this character, and then once it like that little showdown happens, yeah, you're just like, how I was thinking like, girl, how would it go any other way? What did you
Right. What
expect,
did
you
you
know?
think was going to happen? But
Yeah.
like, so the main character, Delia, she's friends with this antique dealer. And then she's also friends with this professor, right? And so the thing is that the professor and the antique dealer just have these totally opposite ideas about how stories work is really what it comes down to. And Delia's caught in the middle and wanting to impress both of these people. But ultimately, there's just really no way to do it. Of course, their opposing views are not gonna, it's not gonna end well, as you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, and that's just for the bigger picture that speaks to and how it ties into the whole collection as a whole. It's just exploring what what was what's the deeper layer there? What's the motivation? What are the what's what is it an example of? Is it an example of trying to impress people or trying to like somehow merge these two parts of yourself? Or you know what I mean? It could be is it just makes you think, what were you trying to do? What were you trying to do there?
Yeah. I think in so many situations, I don't know, in my life, and then this is what I'm interested in exploring stories is we have these kind of opposing impulses or these mixed feelings, opposing impulses, and we're trying to figure out how to like satisfy all of it somehow, maybe, or reconcile it. And it's
Yeah.
really difficult, right? Because I don't know about you, but a lot of the times, like, I want one thing and I want another thing, and I want both those things, but they cannot go together, right?
Yeah. It's yeah, how do you find those outlets to like satisfy both of those like little parts of yourself that seem to be combative? It's
Yes, right.
yeah, for sure. I know, and I think about that in my friend groups. I a lot of my closest friends are so different from one another, but I've just maintained these friendships through like different points in my life where I was much different person at 12 than I was at 20, but I still have close relationships and friendships that have lasted that long, but like the times that they have those groups of friends or those
Right.
single friends have interacted, I'm just like, "Oh, like it's not gonna happen with the
Yeah.
with the whole
Worlds
joining thing, you
collide,
know?
like the whole world's colliding thing. It's like you've
Like,
lived a certain amount of time, you collect enough people from these different spheres that if you try to have them all together, it just doesn't work. Really, the only
no.
time that should happen is probably at your funeral, right?
What
You
a you
know, or
know,
your
like
wedding, whatever. Sometime when you're not actively paying attention to what's going on among those
there you
people,
go, yes.
you're
Where
distracted.
it's exactly, exactly, yeah, it just reminded me of my own wedding where it was, like, different personalities involved and who was standing up and everything, and at the end of the day, like, the day of, like, everyone had a great time, but yeah, there's definitely some drama, and it was because there's some different personalities, and there's only so much I could do about that. I'm like, "Can you all just suck it up until August 22nd?" You know? It's like,
Behave
"Can you just"
yourself for just a hot minute, right? So I can
you know,
get
bite your tongue, just be cooperative. Exactly. Yeah, that story, that part it did besides the antiquing aspect of it, that part, like, I was really like yeah, that was one of the more memorable ones, I think, just because it all came to a head, and it was I don't know, as the readers, you let us into it, and then once it happened, you were like, "Yeah, of course. What did you Did you do that on purpose? What happened?"
yeah, and I have to say, as a writer, as a person, I'm really pretty conflict averse. I really don't like those kinds of uncomfortable situations. And when I'm writing stories, it really takes a lot of drafts for me to be able to push the characters to those points where these little blow ups or an awkward conversation or whatever actually takes place. I'll write a lot of versions where I'm like, and then, nah, nothing happened. It was
Yeah.
fine. We're all good.
You're like,
That's not a
"No."
very compelling story. Yeah. So I
I
really
could see that because yeah, I'm, like, thinking some writers, like, yeah, maybe they're not, like, confrontational, but maybe they, like, live vicariously through their characters, like, where they could imagine what if they could, like, say what they wanna say or do this naughty thing and things like that, but you're on your hand, you're like, "Oh, I don't it took a lot for me to get there."
I'm definitely fine with saying the naughty thing, like, that happens all the time, but in these conflict situations where there's actual active argument or just confronting something that's been simmering between people. There's another story called Flown in which these two old friends meet up after a very long time, and there's some a lot of water under the bridge. And so there's a scene in that story where they first encounter each other after
Yeah.
a lot of years. And that one was really difficult for me to write, just to figure out like, oh, that situation would be so awkward. Like
Yeah.
what
Yeah,
feels
because as the reader, I remember that I'm thinking like, okay, that was just an example, but that where it was that moment when you're leading us in and you're telling the story where the readers we finally get to the point, find out what that fallout was about, like what happened. And then it's just didn't really have to end up so awkward where there was no coming back from that. But that happens all the time.
oh
Like
yeah.
once you cross that threshold, once you cross that line, it's really hard to like nothing's the same again. And it's a shame that it was just nope, that's where it ends. That's where that friendship, that relationship ends, and then it's yeah, it's, like, awkward because your lives you're not done with each other yet. Like
That's right. That's right. And there's also, I think it's so hard to figure out how to like let a friendship subside with any kind of gracefulness. I think
Yeah,
what most often happens is there's some sort of rift, or sometimes it's an argument, but sometimes it's something more subtle. And then I think what happens is people just tend to ghost, and
yeah,
or you just stop seeing that person. And so you never really have it out exactly.
yeah,
And then when you run
and then
into
by the time
years,
it's, like, too late, it's, like, awkward to try to have it out. It's awkward
yeah.
to try to revisit that or, like, the moment's passed. No, there's no point to talking about it right now.
And you've become a different, if it's years
Yeah,
later, you basically become a different person. So it's, you can't recreate it. But I think for me, when those things have happened in my life, they always carry a grief with them. And that I, part of it is a grief for my own behavior, maybe, or where did I fail, or what could I have done to make that situation better. But it's also just, it's just a grief for when we lose a friendship.
yeah.
It's a
Ex
loss, you
Yeah,
know?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, the loss part of it, and it's I think that's what we have to, like, remember as readers or as people. It's loss isn't death, and loss can be, like, what once was, or
Right.
relationships, or it's not always, like, you're missing the person because they're no longer there, like, physically. It's like that tie is severed, and there's
Yeah.
it's so difficult to, like there's no coming back from that, and it's sad, it could be
It
really
is sad.
sad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, or
Yeah,
you
and
both
it's
moved to different places in your life, and you just can't quite like mesh up anymore.
yeah, exactly, no, absolutely. One of the stories I do wanna well, we could keep it spoiler free or I'll edit the stuff because I, like I think it was at the Arrowhead where the woman is she's taking care she's, like, in a care center, in a senior care home, and one of the elderly patients, or whatever you wanna call them, residents, she knows him from the past from her times with her mom's working at a motel, and he was
Right.
one of the guests there. So this is just for my personal, like I could edit it out. This is just for my personal clarification.
Yeah.
So like I guess it wasn't like I was trying to figure out what exactly the role that he played in her brother's, like her family's demise, because I know that to the point where she felt like he owed her something. And because I guess it wasn't like when I was reading it, I was like, maybe it was implied, but I think maybe I missed it. But it was like, I guess it wasn't, or maybe that was the point where it was like, what did he do that caused her brother to drown? Or how did the events leading, how do those interactions lead up to that?
Yeah. Yeah,
The
I
only
mean,
thing I could get from that is because she wasn't there because she didn't want to be around him or something, or she thought, I don't know. Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
just
he,
for my personal clarification.
right. For one thing, that think about how it leads to the family's demise is copy that the press wrote for the book covers.
Okay.
That that's part of the wording.
Okay. Yeah.
Um, But I think in the larger sense, she blames him because he's been visiting the motel. He's sleeping with her mom. Her mom starts to talk about how maybe she's going to be able to get out of the motel and get an
Right.
apartment for kids. She's a young single mom with two kids. And so hopefully what you read through that is that this guy's been making some kind of promises
Got
to
it. Yes.
that he's going to help her. And when the little girl is not watching her brother and he drowns in the pool, the mother just sees all of her dreams like blowing up and she leaves. She basically abandons the daughter. So I think it's not so much that obviously the guy's at
It's kind
fault,
of like
right?
indirect. So yeah,
Kind of
maybe I wasn't
indirect,
expect yeah, I was maybe because I was like I was expecting like because like yeah, that I got that much where there was something going on and she was watching it through a child's eyes, right? So there was only a certain level of understanding
right?
or intuition that she had through unspoken words or just whatever. And yeah, I guess it was like, what role did he play? But yeah, it was like indirect, where it's like the chain of events. So I definitely caught that. So maybe I was just like, is there something that I was missing? But no, there was.
No,
Like
no,
maybe there
you weren't
wasn't at
missing
all. Yeah.
anything. I think it's like how there can be people who are involved in our lives and contribute directly and indirectly to things that happen to us, and whether they exactly caused it or not. Yeah, that's one of the we can focus some kind of blame or anger at that person, whether that's 100% fair or not. And I think
Yeah.
another thing about her, Charlotte's feelings about that man, it's that she, in some ways, she resents that he would pay was paying attention to her brother and nobody was paying attention to her. That's
Yeah.
like the thing is like her whole life, no one's really been paying attention to her.
Yeah.
Um, until oddly he does at the end in the nursing home.
Yeah.
She's helping him. He finally sees her,
Yeah.
but he can't place her. He doesn't remember.
Exactly. He recognizes certain features and she doesn't take her chance to be like, yeah, it's me, motherfucker.
God, because right, she's become a bit philosophical at this point, and he's old, he's sickly.
Yeah. Yeah, she's I don't know, but yeah, so then I was as a reader being introspective about it. I was like, yeah, maybe that's just representing like you never know when your paths are going to cross again and what that could mean for you at that point and what opportunities might arise at that point because obviously she recognized him. I don't know if she saw it as an opportunity or not, but she felt like she felt like he owed her something and then she took it. So it I appreciated that aspect of it, but I was just like, "Wait, did I miss something?" Because I wanted to I did speak to me. It was one of the more probably all the stories are strong, but I think not like it resonated with me, but it was stronger to me anyway, but I was like, "Wait a second, did I miss something?" But yeah, I guess a reader is just what yeah, it's just an example of how you don't how these paths can cross one way or the other, and you never know in the future, you can encounter this person again, and maybe you have the upper hand this time. It's
And also, I remember some years ago, I think I was listening to maybe like an episode of This American Life Hourglass show in which
yeah, it's fantastic.
people, yeah, people were talking, telling stories about how they like tried to go back and confront their parents about something maybe in their youth and just realized that it's pointless. Everybody, the thing is done. They've all changed. Maybe even the parents are dead. It's this sort of futility of going back and trying to either get somebody to say why they did what they did or try to get an apology from somebody.
Some sort of epiphany, some sort of closure, and
Yeah, and
yeah,
it's too late. The ship has sailed. And at some point in this story, that's what Charlotte realizes is even if I were to tell him who I am, what's gonna come of it? Like
yeah,
nothing, you know?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and that's part of I don't wanna say the lesson, but that's part of the takeaway, right? It's even if she did get it, it's still almost like it's anticlimactic, right? It's not as satisfying as she
Yeah.
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 Definitely. Yeah, definitely. It's just and it's like, how did you accomplish this in 20 pages? I don't know.
A lot of drafts.
There you go, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All of the stories that I write go through, most of them go through just so many drafts. And
I think
sometimes it takes years for me to figure them out, really.
yeah. I think one of the things I read was the purpose of the first draft is to be a first draft. Like It's okay, just expect that this is not gonna be, like, the final print. It's just
Oh,
to get it
no.
out. Yeah.
That's one of the things I'm working with my students all the time is just teaching them. At first, the drafting process may seem terrible, right? You don't wanna have to, like, cut things that you wrote.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it really becomes your friend because each draft is this new kind of you can do anything. You can totally change it up if
Yeah.
something's working. So, I don't know, sometimes I think I spend too long in stories, but
Well,
I
it takes the time that it takes. It takes
right.
whatever it takes to get to make it come out full circle, right? To get the point across and to get the message out there. Again, hopping off of that, like what were maybe like you've alluded to this, but if you can it's like a two-parter. What were like the most if there is an answer for this, what was the most like challenging story to write or parts of the collection to write, and then the more enjoyable stories or parts to write?
Yeah, so I think that a couple of the stories that were maybe more challenging for me were to write were Damn It, in which the main character is a little girl who is visiting a family member at an old house in their family that was once a plantation. And it's a child starting to think about how does a white person begin to think about race and the legacy of family as slaveholders, and also this sort of her burgeoning awareness that racism is a thing, and when is she going to start to take part in that system
Yeah.
if she is. And so that one was tricky to figure out, like, her point of view and like where she was in that.
Right. So yeah, you play with that, like her becoming self-aware and then self-reflect like reflecting when she wants to believe that know what she questions herself, like how she's perceiving the situation. Yeah, I that was one of my favorite ones of the collection for sure.
So that one was I spent a lot of time with that one trying to figure out the finer points in there. And then another one is the first story in the collection, which is Don't Breathe, which has a two element and a scene of women talking about their experiences with sexual assault. And really the focus of that is how it's really about a situation in which friends left a friend behind. So I didn't want the focus of the story to be the assault itself, but this
Sure.
sort of like the resonance years later of how the friends are still thinking about what happened. Um,
Yeah. I like that one too, and I like how I think it was a really good choice to put that as the first story because then it sets the tone, but it also yeah, because you wanna I could definitely see how you wanted that to you definitely wanted to make that point, but you didn't want that to be the point, right? Like you wanted it was about like, okay, we're all about women sticking together, but even like the main character, she's reflecting and she even comes across she comes to that realization in the moment where she's no she like giving her friends the benefit of the doubt. She was like, I don't maybe I don't remember the situation correctly. Like maybe they didn't see it that way. Maybe I wasn't it's not their fault that that they like forgot about me. And as a reader, I was like, it makes you go over the fact that what maybe like you're justifying other people's behavior or like trying to explain it or trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. But like at the end of the day, it's like there's so many okay, what's this woman's story? Like what was her time? What was her moment that happened to her? And
right.
that's the bigger picture. It's yeah, reflecting on friendship, but in the bigger picture, it's like every woman has some version of this story and it could be tied to soberness, it could be tied to inebriation, it could be tied to friends who weren't looking out for her, it could be tied to her own self-destruction, it could be tied and even whatever the reason is, the bottom line is nobody should be subject to that treatment no matter what, like, to the ultimate, like, result, like, nobody just don't rape people, don't sexual assault people. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter if they're alone, it doesn't matter if they're a piece of shit, it doesn't matter if they're it's it doesn't matter what they're wearing, it's like, how about you just don't rape people? Like, how about why are you just looking at one part of it? Because it's not uncommon where in a group of women, 14 women, whatever, yeah, 10 of them at least probably have experienced
Sure.
some form of this situation, and but focusing on that one character where she's here, this is what I've been thinking,
Mhm.
and it speaks to that, like, the woman's experience still, like, as women, I think we still try to explain it away. We try to make sense of it, and we try to, like, say, "Okay, did we do something wrong? Was it their fault? Should we have been looking out for each other?" But unfortunately, it's maybe they maybe at that point in the story when they're older women, "Yeah, I would never leave you." But it's
Right.
back then, they're different people back then. So it's yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
really enjoyed that one.
by the end of that story, that Delia, the main character, she just that's part of what she gets to is I can't make a story out of this, right? This thing that happened to me. And I think a story that feels like gets the whole truth of what happened or how she's felt about it all these years. And one of the things that I wanted to capture in that story or hoped to capture was just this feeling of how whatever might have happened to you at some point in your life. And as you said, many women, pretty much all women I know have a story
Yeah.
or have one of these, what I call the bad thing that happened, but how it never leaves you, that it's always hanging around so that you get in some different you hear a song or you go to a certain place or you experience a sunset and all of a sudden there's that thing again.
Yeah.
And it's just like the exhaustion of never being able to like not have it popping up in your memory.
Yeah.
Um,
100%.
and that's one of the experiences this group of women is sharing.
It was fun, like, the scenario, the environment the setting that you put the story in, like, girls' weekend, like, all these different women, and the main character, it seems like she feels a little obligation, like, maybe she's not up to it. And then by the end of the story, she finds contentment. It's to a point. She finds an activity that she can tolerate, like with in this
Yeah.
week long, like the girls' week. Even that it sounds exhausting. Like a girls' weekend sounds fantastic, but I could see like a
Oh
whole
my
week
God, a
being
whole
yeah.
week. Ugh. I know. It really gets it. I love my friendships, but I also need a lot of time alone. Um,
Yes.
and the idea of doing any kind of like mass social activity in a large group for an entire week
Where
is
you're yeah, there's almost no escape. I hate to put it that way, but no.
no, that's absolutely,
Yeah.
that's why by the end of the story is she's like, I've got to get out of here and go for a walk.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna be in the hot tub all day. Like
Yeah,
I
for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm 100% there where I love my alone time. I don't know if introversion, whatever, like we recharge. I think I don't know, it depends. I'm still like on the fence about extrovert versus introvert because it's like extroverts they feed off of energy of other people where introverts they recharge being by themselves. But I don't know, like I can if I was a true introvert, I don't think I could do something like this where just be able to strike up a conversation no matter what, or at least like about the subject matter, about gush about your work. But I'm also one of my favorite forms of self care is just going to a bar by myself and having a drink and reading my book. Like
I
that
love it.
is a yeah, that is a way for me to just enjoy some me time for an hour or two and just read. And even if it's the noise, moderate noise, I don't mind. I'm just like there to have a snack and to have a drink and enjoy my time. And it's the simplest thing, but I totally resonate with that, with just yes, I want my girl time, but I'm also like I'm done.
Yeah. Oh yeah. When my family goes away for the weekend, people are like, do you need to come over for dinner or something? I'm like, no, I'm good.
No.
I'm gonna be alone eating my cereal and
Seriously, yeah.
reading my book, watching my show,
Absolutely,
whatever.
just microwave some leftovers, I don't care just
Don't care.
exactly, either with a book or, yep, binge watch, just catch up on
Mhm.
your shows, exactly, watch a movie that nobody wants to watch, like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
perfect,
and,
yeah, I'm right
I
there with
think
you.
of myself the same way. It's like I call myself like a slashy, right? Introvert slash extrovert because I have to be like when I teach and everything, you have to get into
Yes,
the energy of interacting with people and it's great. But at the end of the day, I'm like, oh, I got a veg in front of my show.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, it's like making sure you have that balance so like you're ready to go the next day, right? You're ready to teach the next lesson, to be in the next classroom, for sure. For sure. They're definitely you gotta figure it out because otherwise you're gonna drive yourself crazy.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So just a couple more questions before we wrap up here. So what this also might be a loaded question. What do you hope that readers get out of these stories, this collection, if anything?
First, I hope they enjoy some of the humor in the collection. You asked me before what I had fun
Yeah.
writing, and there are a couple of the stories in here. I have some moments of fun, I would say, with every story that I wrote in this. And I think there's humor in all of them. It's to a larger or lesser degree in each story. A couple of the stories that are the more fantastical or almost experimental kind of stories came to me more of a piece. So one of those would be Hot Lesbian Vampire Magic
Yeah.
School, uh, which which was really fun to write. I just
Yeah, I could tell you had fun
let
fun with
myself
that one.
loose with that one. Also, The Woman Who Did Things Wrong, which is almost like a fairy tale.
Yeah.
Those were very fun to write. So I hope that people enjoy the humor and some of the wordplay, but I also hope that as women or girls read these stories that there's some kind of spark of recognition that some of our experiences that we might not love to talk about because they're embarrassing or just confusing. I just feel like I'm in this perpetual state of confusion about how I'm supposed to do my life. Um, and so I
It's
just want
almost
to
like a
say,
little
like,
comfort. You know what?
yeah,
You're like, I'm at this age and I still am feeling this way.
I
It's
tell you
like
what, yeah, as
just
I've
roll
been,
with it.
I just had my 51st birthday. I'm saying I'm 50 fun, trying to make it fun.
Yeah. Yes,
Um,
I'm gonna use that when I'm
yeah,
approaching 37 next month, so I'm like, but even then I'm still like, okay, I try to put it in my mom's perspective, right? She was 37 when she gave birth to my brother, and I'm thinking like, oh, okay, like that kind of helps put it into context a little bit.
right,
But then I realized, oh, that's not. It seems old, but like for childbirth maybe, but it's not that. It's
yeah.
not old. I feel like
But
I
in the
don't feel
grand
old.
scheme of things, not old at all.
No.
I always think my mom used to say to me, when she only lived to be like 68, 69, but she used to say to me, like, I get up every morning and I just feel like the same as I ever did. And then I look in the mirror and I'm like, who is that old woman? Because on the inside, I just still feel like I'm 12 years old.
I could see that, yeah, because I look at just not just my mom, but celebrities are probably a bad example, but when you hear about women, I don't know, Dolly Parton, isn't she also 70 or something?
Oh
But
my
she's
God, I think
still
yeah, who knows, 80.
yeah, she still seems sharp enough, like, she's still got that energy, she's still got that attitude, that personality, and I'm
Sure.
like, yeah, so it's not all hope is lost, like, getting old isn't horrible, I
Much
think you
rather
just
be my age now. Much rather. It's better. So
Exactly,
many
with your life experiences, and the older I get, the more I realize, like, the more confident, like, I am where, "You know what? This is me, and I like who I'm turning out to be, and probably gonna be a different person in 10 years from now." And I'm not worried about it, and if I'm not your cup of tea, that's perfectly fine, like, I'm a big dork, I don't care.
right.
Yeah, exactly, it's, like, refreshing. Yep, pretty
I
much,
hear it.
okay, that's fine. It's not nothing wrong with either of us.
No, I mean that you can't like everybody and everybody can't like you. It's
Exactly. And I think, yeah, I think that's something that comes like that with age that you realize that and you're secure enough in yourself where
right.
that's okay. Whereas teenage me, I would have been like,
Oh,
I was like more self-conscious. Oh, like, why don't you like me? What did I do? At what point did I mess up? And now I'm like, oh, I hope I didn't make your life worse. I don't know. Maybe that's the extent of what I hope I didn't do something to harm you. Otherwise, if it's simply you don't like me, like that's okay.
yeah,
Thanks for
let's
your
move on.
input.
I feel so much for my students because I see them, they're 18, 19, 20,
Yeah.
and they're still in that space where they're anxious about everything. And I get it, but I'm like so relieved. But I
Yeah.
always try to say, I just try to say, just calm down. It's going to be fine. By the time you're my age, you'll barely remember you took this class.
Serious.
It will not matter to you.
Exactly. It's like yeah, it's like how do you tell them without them like sometimes they just have to realize it themselves. But
Yeah.
how do you like yeah, how do you convince them, trust me, in 10, 15 years you're not gonna you're
You'll,
gonna be
yeah.
fine. Like you're
Right. Right, and you're trying to say that while at the same time, like, not downplaying their
Yeah,
feeling, you know,
absolutely.
they're very real. I remember how strong the feelings were at that
Yeah,
age.
100%. Yeah, it's just rite of passage, it's a way of life, coming of age, all that stuff. Yeah, for
Rough.
sure. What is next for you? Are you working on anything that you could talk about?
I am working on a novel. I don't really want to talk about it. I'm of the slightly superstitious school of I don't want to talk it out.
Sure.
Um, but it is centered on my character Delia, who
Okay.
appears in several of these stories. And she's a character who kind of shares some particular things of my life experience, but definitely not other things. So I try to let her I'm actually a pretty, like, cautious person, I think. I have made some rather reasonable choices for the most other than being a writer, which is not a reasonable choice. Uh, otherwise, I think I'm pretty cautious, and so I try to let her maybe go a little off, be a little more impulsive than maybe I would be. But
That's
so
part of it, right? That's part of the exploration, that's part of the fun. You
yeah.
just imagine.
It's for I have a lot of I'm really great catastrophizer. I'm a worst case scenario. Uh, Came up with 6 of them in 5 seconds. So, writing fiction, I think, is a great way to it's a release valve for some of that.
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely. That's
yeah.
exciting.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'm working on that, and I have a lot of ideas for other projects, some nonfiction as well. Right now, I'm just trying to balance it all with the teaching and with doing all the cool PR stuff that we're doing around
Yeah.
the release.
Yeah, you're riding the promotion wave right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. And I'm gonna be doing lots of events and conversations and which is really fun because with my first book, I did some of that stuff, but it was in late 2021, early
Mm,
2022. So we were still really affected by pandemics.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Business is not usual. Yeah.
Very not usual. Hopefully, I know we're in a surge right now, apparently, but hopefully some of that will subside by
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just like at one point I was like, I don't know, it's just living amongst us now. It's just part of our lives now, but
right.
it's not to be doom and gloom, but I feel like it's not this isn't like the only thing in our lifetime that we're gonna see. I imagine it's probably there could be easily like another thing that's gonna throw humanity for a loop for sure.
Yeah, probably so. We gotta pace ourselves with our own.
Yeah, and amongst all the everything else, right?
Yeah, I know. You have to like that's why I try to like keep a limited diet of news and other stuff. Not also whatever
It's
turns out to be happening over the next whatever years.
yeah,
This is my one life to live too. So I try to make the
exactly.
best of
That's
it,
what I
you know?
know. It's oh yeah, it's like when all it seems like all hope is lost, but then I'm like on the other hand, I'm like ah, nothing matters anymore. Just do what you want. It's like who cares? Like I
Yeah.
don't. It's you don't want to sweat the small stuff and look at the big picture, and it's just everyone else is just living their lives and just have to do your best to yeah, like, not feel too overwhelmed, but I'm like, I don't know, this the cynic in me is just like, "Nothing matters anymore, nobody cares. Just do whatever you want."
I have to say that working with younger people also just fills me with a lot more hope because I think it's there a lot of people my age or older want to be like, oh, these young people, they're always on screens and they're so this or that. And I'm like, they're awesome. They are
Yeah,
so like the students that I teach are so kind-hearted and empathetic and like open. And it
they're
reminds,
different, it's like a different shift that generation of entering new adult now.
yeah,
It's ridiculous because my niece is 20 years old, and I'm like oh, like, just she just inspires me, for lack of better words.
right?
She surprises me with just some of her overall attitude and how open she is and
I love
unapologetic she is about her feelings, and yeah, and then the whole thing about, like, older generations, but that's been happening for years, right? Where
it.
older generations are saying, "Oh, the young people here today," and it's like those young people are now your age, right? Like, they're 50s,
Yeah.
60s.
I'm Gen X, right? We were all, oh, they don't care about anything, the slackers, you know. So
Hippies, I don't know. Like what?
I mean, it's every generation, right? If you go back and read history about, oh my gosh, young people in the 20s, those crazy flappers and their
Yeah.
risque dancing and wearing those dresses with their knees showing. What's gonna happen?
Yeah.
You know, uh, society's falling apart. Yeah, that's one
Yeah.
of the great things I think about. I've always been interested in history, and so I read a lot of about history, and it really gives you the longer view. People during the Black Plague, people thought things were pretty bad. During like all of these different wars, things very bad, right?
Mhm.
Uh, I don't think it pays to be Pollyanna-ish about the problems that we have in our world today, but at the same time, I think being able to have some perspective on history and the longer view can help you maybe not freak out as much.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like exactly. Perspective is just like we at the end of the day, it's like human nature. Like we react very similar to like a lot of the situations. It's like there are patterns, right? And then we
Right,
react to it very similar. Whether it's we react similar to change, we react similar to things that the extremes that we want to fight for or fight against, right? It's just it human nature in general. There's like a lot of commonalities, even if it's the big picture might seem different. It's just
right.
it's human beings.
So what I try to do is just surround myself with people who are like doing creative things or people who are doing work where they're like caring for people or caring for the environment or they're trying to make good change in their community.
Exactly.
Like those are the people I want to have around me because they also,
Yeah,
they keep my hope up and they inspire me
exactly.
to do better.
It's
I
that energy and that positivity, and it's yeah, you know what? You're being real about it. Yeah, this is a
yeah,
problem. Let's try to not contribute to the problem. Let's try to,
will
yeah,
not just slide into complacency or just,
yes,
oh, there's nothing we can do, let everything go to hell. Uh,
yeah, exactly, exactly. No,
Not
100%.
that
I'm
it
right there
isn't a
with you.
battle.
Choose your role, choose what you can do, and yeah, exactly. Don't just sit around and being like, I'm just gonna worry about myself. It's no, there's like something to be
Yeah,
admired about wanting to even just do a little something. Just do a little
right.
something. Yeah.
Whatever little thing you can do in your own sphere of the world.
Yeah, exactly. 100% for sure. Julia Ridley Smith, where can we find you online and on social media?
You can find me at juliaridleysmith.com. That's my website, and I'm rarely on Twitter X anymore, but I do have a profile there, Julia Trifles, and I'm Julia Trifles on Instagram and Julia Ridley Smith Writer on Facebook. So I'm lots of places, and if you go to the events page on my website, that's showing a lot of the places where I'm gonna be doing readings and conversations and events all throughout the spring this year.
Nice.
I would love to see lots of people out at those places. I'm going to be in conversation with a lot of other great writers who will be really fun to talk to.
Yeah, perfect. That's exciting. Yeah, that'll be really fun too. It's like a different energy level for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so Sex Romp Gone Wrong, that comes out on February 6th. Julia, thanks so much. This was such a cool, awesome, fun conversation. I recommend this really to anybody who, I guess, like women's fiction, but like short stories. I feel like you could pick it up and put it down. You don't have to remember a plot. You just
Right.
finish the story and then come back to it later. And
You go to
I think
sleep and read another one tomorrow. Right.
exactly. But yeah, and then whenever you get to your longer story or anything else you got going on, feel free to come back and we can chat about that too.
I would love to. Thank you so much, Megan. And it was really fun talking with you today.
And there you go. That was Julia Ridley Smith talking about Sex Romp Gone Wrong. That is her collection of short stories available on February 6th. Rate, review, subscribe. You can check out the show notes where you can find links to purchase the book and where to follow Julia on online and on social media. Please do find Cantina Book Club on all your favorite social media and your favorite podcast players. And if you really want to help the authors out, you want to help me out, please do go find them on Amazon and Goodreads. Rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. It really does help them out. Pre-orders really help them out. Please go do that. And like I said, you short stories, you can't go wrong because you can just pick up the book, set it down, pick it up, set it down without worrying about where you left off. But either way, as always, thank you guys so much for listening.